And welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And today joining me is Dr. Kip Davis. And some hype leading up to this one, I think.
Oh, you think so, eh? Maybe just a little bit.
All the Danny Jones interviews, all that.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
But regardless of all that stuff, this will be a fun topic because
I think so.
Something we're both passionate about. You coming at it from all of your training and years of studying Dead Sea Scrolls, me just being a fan of all this stuff, talking to different experts in the field, wondering what's going on. I remember first hearing from Russell Gmerkin, I think it was like 2 years ago, and I thought, what is he talking about? I was like, there's no way that this stuff is. And then I started to see what he meant by there might be some nuances, that there might be later dating that we're told. And so I'll give a rundown of what I think is going on, and then you can just kind of jump in.
Sure.
So we assume the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, the Torah. Let's be specific with the Torah first.
Those are all three different things, by the way. But
right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So the Torah being the first 5 books of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
We assume, especially people in the church coming out of being a Christian or whatever, Islam, even Muslims assume this, that the Torah is this ancient text that was authored by Moses. And not everybody believes that part. Maybe some people just think these
Bronze Age, 13th century BCE, yeah.
Right. For the most part, being passed down. And then there's the prophets after that, and then there's the kings and prophets sort of coexist after that, and then the New Testament comes later. And so when I heard for the first time that there's a possibility that the Torah is actually the newest out of the Old Testament, and that the prophets are older, I go, wait a minute, that's odd. What do you think about that?
No, listen. Right from the get-go, I'm going to agree with you 100% here. I think, and the picture here is just a really, really complicated one, and I think that's the thing that if there's one thing I want to communicate in our stream today, is that this is just an exceptionally complicated picture, and the reason it's so complicated is because it's a big body of literature, right? And it's a lot of different pieces of literature, and there's a lot of moving parts in terms of how all this got put together. But I mean, I think spot on here when we're looking for some of the earliest pieces of what Israelite religion was. I teach a course on Israelite religion, and this is what I spend a fair bit of my time doing in the course. When you're looking for these clues and these early pieces, usually the place to start is in the prophets, or in material that we wouldn't necessarily identify as Torah, right? Like most scholars are in agreement that if we think of the whole Hebrew Bible as this collection of individual pieces of literature, the single oldest piece in that collection is probably the Song of Deborah, which appears in Judges 5, right?
That's that. So, okay, what you're talking about is the Song of Deborah from Judges having its own archaic sort of Hebrew that's you're looking at and saying there's a layer within there that's older than what we date Deborah. Do. So yeah,
absolutely.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and the reason for that, there's a few things going on here. One of the reasons for that is the language itself. When you learn Hebrew, and it's fun because you're reading through Judges, and the narrative stuff is usually really easy. It's prose. It's systematic once you figured it out, and all of a sudden you get to Judges 5 and you're just like, what the hell just happened? Because the language looks almost totally different.
Sure.
Different words.
And
instructions.
First of all, I'm not inept at all at Hebrew to even notice that. I've even tried. I'm like, what are they seeing? I have no idea. I just don't know Hebrew that well, and so I just assume that what's being told by the experts is correct, and that there's these layers, these pieces in the text that date to older time periods. But there's a few of them that I think that I might, with what I know, can challenge, and there's a reason why. And I think one of them is like the Song of Moses, and it's one of these fragments that people say is one of the older fragment or one of the archaic. And I'm sure that, and look, I don't know, maybe the Greek or maybe the Hebrew is archaic, but the problem I have with that is that Moses doesn't show up in any text until, from what I can see, the end of the Persian period, but mostly Hellenistic period.
Right.
So do you think that they're using an older text and then putting Moses in there? Is that a possibility?
Well, first of all, let's be clear here. As far as I'm aware, Moses actually doesn't make an appearance in the Song of Moses.
Really?
Like the actual song itself. I'm just gonna.
That would make more sense then.
Sure, it would. And this is the way I'm gonna pull up my own translation of this here. I've got it. I did this recently. If you give me a second. I think that's in. Nope. Maybe in this chapter. So,
by the way, we'll do super chats at the end. That way we can.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, we can keep the way we're flowing.
Okay, so that's. Sorry, I should have had. I'll have a few things that I'll likely want to pull up, and we absolutely need to talk a little bit about Moses in this discussion, because I think there is, even though like I said, it's developed and the picture's complex and there's a lot of moving parts here, right? So oh shoot,
while you're looking for that, I want to, if anyone's watching and they're like, who is Neal to even challenge Moses? What are you talking about? Moses is obviously one of the oldest prophets there is, and the reason why I'm even saying this, and I'm not the first person to come up with this, there's a lot of people before me who've noticed this, I'm just saying it now, is that when we look at the evidence that we have, physical evidence, for example, the story, we all know that Israel was conquered by the Assyrians and many of the Jews fled into Egypt, settled in Elephantine. All the evidence that we have between the time that Assyrians conquer Israel and between that and the time of the time that they return back to Israel, I should say. So Persian period, somewhere between Persian and Hellenistic, we don't find Moses in any of those texts. So some people might say that's an argument from silence, but I disagree, because there's just no evidence at all. It's just not even about silence. There's just no evidence. There's just no Moses. And I think like this is a different argument than saying, oh, where's the evidence for Jesus? Finding a person who existed in history is like finding a needle in a haystack. But finding like religious text and finding like mythology that exists, that's like finding a radio state. It's like finding a radio station with a ham radio. Like, you're gonna find it. It's there. It's either there or it's not.
So let's make an important distinction here between what we actually have attested in manuscripts and where we can set those manuscripts, and then what we actually have attested in texts, and how and why we can date some of the texts that we do. Okay, so from the perspective of actual physical evidence, which is the manuscripts that we have, the inscriptions, all this stuff, you're absolutely correct that there's no attestation of Moses prior to like the 3rd century, right?
Yeah.
Now,
I would say that if we're going to use the fragments, and I think there's no reason to deny the fragments. People will say, oh, the fragments are somebody quoting somebody quoting somebody quoting somebody, and then it ends up in Eusebius in like the 4th century AD. Well, we have to look at those as evidence. I think there's no reason to deny that Hecataeus of Abdera, who we lost his original text, why would people just make up that this guy's writing about Moses? And it's more than one person talking about Hecataeus, talking about Moses. So I think you can say for like a 9 out of 10 that there was a guy named Hecataeus of Abdera who wrote about Moses probably around 320 BC. I'm throwing that out there. That's not the earliest. That's the latest we can go on Moses. I'm not saying that's the earliest. We can figure that out right as we go. But I'm saying off the bat, there's a term for that in Latin. I forgot what it's called. It's like so there's some word for that. I think I had it in my notes somewhere. But anyways, it means like the earliest you can date something.
It's like a terminus ad quo.
Terminus ad quo. That's what it is. Yeah. Thank you. So that's where we're going to start. We're starting off with 320 BCE. Moses is attested by a person.
So yes. Yes. Now, you said something important right at the beginning, and this is where we need to talk about the Hebrew prophets.
Sure.
So outside of the Torah, we have all these other Hebrew texts. The manuscript evidence for them is no better than what we have for the Torah text, right? Like our earliest copies of virtually all the Hebrew Bible texts come from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So these go back to, at the very earliest, like the late 3rd, maybe a handful, and I'll show a couple of pictures of like this one manuscript here that I think is probably mid 3rd. Like we could probably date it to 250 BCE, right? So we have a copy of the book of Jeremiah, for example, that dates to maybe 200. So like that's our manuscripts. However, we have really good reasons to think that many of these prophets were speaking and their stuff was being written down many centuries prior to this, prior to the destruction of Jerusalem in the Two Kingdom period. And the reasons for that is because of how we basically locate them socially on the basis of who they're talking to and what they're saying. So, for example, our oldest prophet is Hosea, as far as the scholars are concerned. He's usually pretty comfortably dated in the 9th century during the reign of Jehu. Why do scholars think this? Because he addresses Jehu directly. His prophecy is delivered to the house of Jehu. And then working through his prophecy, all of it appears very comfortably within this Assyrian crisis that was starting to emerge out of the north and to affect the house of Israel, the kingdom, the northern kingdom, right, was starting to feel incursions with Assyrian expansion. This is how you locate a text like this. So we'll get back to Hosea in a second, but because you mentioned Moses, I'm going to draw your attention to the prophet Micah, who most scholars will set in the 8th century now. And the reason for this is because of the things that he says. For instance, in Micah 1, right at the beginning of Micah, in Micah 1, chapter 3 to 9, or sorry, Micah chapter 1, verses 3 to 9, it's pretty clear from this that he's assuming that the city of Samaria is still there. The city of Samaria was wiped off the map in 722 BCE, right? So if he's delivering a prophecy to the city of Samaria, sorry guys, I have many dogs in here. I only just noticed, and they're all barking at the same time. Hold on a sec. Okay. If you'll just give.
All right, I'll keep him entertained for a second. So what he said, I have no problem with there being a Hosea who lived in the 8th century BCE. I have no reason to deny that this is something that happened. What I'm looking at, though, is I'm looking at what do we have as a final product? Is what Hosea wrote down? First of all, who was Hosea writing to? These are questions I'm going to ask you when you're finished with your. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but finish what you were saying, and then I'll ask.
So I'm gonna just read a prophecy in Micah chapter 6 here.
All right.
Okay. And Micah is speaking to the northern kingdom, to the kingdom of Israel, right? Or sorry, yeah, he's speaking to the kingdom of Israel again, right on the sort of on in the middle of this Assyrian crisis, when the Assyrians are basically pulling up on the northern kingdom just outside of Samaria. So here in Micah 6, starting at verse 1, hear what Yahweh is saying. Come present my case before the mountains, and let the hills hear you pleading. Hear, you mountains, the case of Yahweh, you firm foundations of the earth, for Yahweh has a case against his people. He has a suit against Israel. My people, what wrong have you done? What hardship have I caused you? Testify against me. In fact, I brought you up from the land of Egypt. I redeemed you from the house of bondage, and I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. And then he goes on in verse 5 to say, my people, remember what Balak, king of Moab, plotted against you, and how Balaam, son of Beor, responded to him. Recall your passage from Shittim to Gilgal, and you will recognize the gracious acts of Yahweh. So here, Micah, preaching in the 7th century, is drawing attention to these foundational figures. He mentions Moses, he mentions Aaron, he mentions Miriam, he mentions Balaam, son of Beor, which is really, really interesting, in large part because if there is a...
He's from Genesis.
No, he's from Numbers.
Numbers.
He appears in Numbers 20. The whole story of Balaam, it's a big one. It's between Numbers chapter 22 and 24. The really, really cool thing about Balaam is that we actually have inscriptional evidence for Balaam. Dating to the 7th century. He was a prophet in Moab. Now, in the biblical story, he's presented as a prophet of Yahweh, who lives in Moab, but is a prophet of Yahweh, and he's calling on Yahweh to curse the Israelites. We actually have this really, really neat, interesting. Sorry, I said 7th. It's 8th century. The 8th century Deir Alla inscription, which is just on the other side of the Jordan River from Jerusalem, in the Transjordan, modern day Jordan. I believe that's modern day Jordan. So they discovered this building, this 8th century building that had a plaster wall, and on it was painted this prophecy. This prophecy of Balaam, son of Beor. I've really? Actually, let me actually read a little bit of this to you because it's cool.
What is that painting dated to?
8th century BCE.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? So, and this is what it says.
The picture, do we have find an image of that maybe? I just want to see it.
Yeah. Actually, do you want to, if you type in to Google, I'll read a selection of the text, but just type into Google Deir Alla inscription. That's Deir Alla inscription.
Okay.
So and you should find some images of it. So I'll just read a little bit of this to you. So this is it. It's introduced as the visions of Balaam, son of Beor. The introduction bit I won't cite, but when it gets to his actual vision, this is what the text says. And these are the townspeople, said to Balaam, son of Beor, why do you fast and why do you weep? And he said to them, be seated and I will relate to you what the Shaddai gods have planned, and go see the acts of the gods. The gods have banded together. The Shaddai gods have established a council, and they have said to Shagar, this is a goddess, sew up, close up the heavens with the dense cloud. The darkness exists there, not brilliance, obscurity and not clarity, so that you instill dread and dense darkness and never utter a sound again. It shall be that the swift and the crane will shriek insult to the eagle, and a nest of vultures shall cry out in response. The stork, the young of the falcon and the owl, the chicks and the heron, sparrow and clusters of eagles, pigeons and birds and fowl of the sky, and a rod shall flay the cattle, skilled diviner. Where are the ewes? A staff shall be brought. Hares eat together. Freely feed, O beasts of the field, and freely drink, asses and hyenas. So this whole that's just a section of it. There's a fair bit more to the vision of Balaam, but it's a. I hope you hear what's going on here. This is a prophecy. There's a good picture of the inscription.
This is it.
There, yeah. So it's beautiful.
So is this an actual papyrus text? What, or is this?
No, it's plaster.
Okay,
so it's plaster on wall.
This right here looks confusing. It looks like a papyrus or something. But now I get.
Yeah, it kind of looks like that. So, and the reason it looks like that is because there's lots of the pieces that have fallen and they've dug up from in and around, and they've been piecing it together, right? And there is some, there's some conjectures and discussions among scholars about how exactly to put all the pieces together. But this is basically the message of Balaam, son of Beor. It's a message from the Shaddai gods, this group of deities, this divine council of El. He actually mentions the council of El earlier in the inscription, and they've gotten together and decided that they're going to wipe out humanity. And so they've given Balaam this vision of them coming down and destroying all mankind. And through the rest of the inscription, they tell the story about how he went about convincing the people this was going to happen and saving the people. So this is a known figure from the 8th century, who then makes an appearance in the biblical text and is polemicized, right? And it's kind of interesting because when you read some of the actual visions of Balaam that are attributed to him in Numbers, they do sound kind of similar to the things that he had said in this. It
mentions the star in this one, doesn't it, or something like that?
Yeah, this is the vision of the scepter and the star appears in Numbers chapter 24.
That becomes relevant for Christianity too. So
really, really important text. Yeah. So, but I hope you're picking up what's happening in this prophecy of Micah. He mentions he's making this connection for Israel, to whom he's speaking in the 8th century. He's making this connection to this historical tradition of Exodus. Is pretty vague about it, but then mentions these three figures: Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. And then he also mentions this incident with Balaam and the king of Moab, Balak, which is a story that appears in Numbers. So now what I'm not saying here, what I want people to be clear about what I'm not saying. I am not saying that the book of Numbers was kicking around in the 8th century.
That's what I was going to say. If I had to guess if I had to adjust what my current understanding is based on this new evidence that you just gave me, my initial reaction, just knee-jerk reaction, is they're using this material to write Numbers later.
Yes.
It's not that this text proves that Numbers existed back then.
Right.
That would be nonsense. Why would you just assume that? But you can say Numbers, whatever we're dating Numbers to, whether it's Persian period or Hellen, I'm going to say somewhere between Persian and Hellenistic period. That's what I'm going to say. Maybe with archaic.
I probably put it earlier, but okay. Yeah,
we'll get deeper into that. But they're using this character. Also, I noticed something. I don't know if you said this. I might have been not paying attention. There's mentions of Ishtar and Shamash and Shagar.
In the Balaam inscription,
that is to me is signature of predating what we would call the Bible, the Torah.
I guess I would say this predates the emergence of a Yahwistic cult. Exactly. Let's call it that.
That's better. I like that term.
So now, what I do think this shows This stuff from Micah, the Deir Alla inscription. What I do think this shows is that there is a developed tradition of some sort already this early, even though we don't know what exactly that looks like. I think we have some hints of it. And at that point, I'll take you to another text. This is from an earlier prophet. So this is Hosea. Let me just pull up the relevant text here. So this is Hosea chapter 12. Remember, Hosea is prophesying during the rule of Jehu. So this is like late 9th century, really early stuff. So and he's preaching again against the northern kingdom, against Israel, and a lot of this makes sense. You see within the Hebrew prophets, especially, an earlier fixation on the northern kingdom, and the reason for that is because from a socioeconomic perspective, the Judahite kingdom, the kingdom in the city of Jerusalem, was little more than a garrison. It was a nothing little backwater. The kingdom of Israel was sort of the dominant power in the region. The northern kingdom in Samaria. There was a kingdom, the Amorite kingdom centered in Damascus was kind of their main rival. And then out of this, there were these other smaller groups, right? There's the Philistines in the southwest. There's the little Judahite kingdom. There's Moab, in the Transjordan and in the east there. But the big power in the area is Israel. So it makes sense that the earlier prophets sort of centered their message and spoke strongly against this northern kingdom. So this is Hosea chapter 12, and it's a really, really interesting text. I'm going to read Hosea chapter 12, verses 1 through 15, because what Hosea is doing here is he's delivering an oracle to the northern kingdom and then kind of using the southern kingdom, Judah, as a foil for the northern kingdom. And in this prophecy that he delivers, you're going to hear the existence of some competing foundational myths and traditions. And some of these you're probably going to recognize. Okay? So here, I'm just starting at the top. Ephraim encircles me with a lie. This is Hosea will often refer to the northern kingdom as Ephraim. And with deceit, the house of Israel. But Judah still roams about with El, with the Kiddoshim. These are the divine beings, like other gods, basically. He remains faithful. Ephraim shepherds the wind and pursues after the east wind. Every day he is multiplying. Falsehood and violence. Now they cut a covenant with Assyria. Now oil is carried off to Egypt. Yahweh petitioned against Judah and punished Jacob for his conduct. By his deeds he repaid him. In the womb he clutched the heel of his brother. By his strength he fought against the gods. He fought with an angel and prevailed. The other, his brother, wept and bestowed favor on him. Bethel, the place he would find him, there he would speak with him. Does this sound familiar?
Sounds like
this little bit. Yeah, this is the story of Jacob and Esau, right? Coming out of the womb, the clutching the heel of his brother. This is sort of the etymology of the name Jacob.
I don't I haven't looked into this at all. Is there any academics that think because that's in there that it's dated later, that it's drawing from, there's a later stratum there in the text?
No, and one of the reasons for that is it's very difficult to tease out. You'll have to what Hosea is doing here is delivering like a complete oracle. It's quite big. It's a whole chapter, right?
Well, the reason I asked that question, because one thing I noticed, and I was just reading, just kind of skimming through academic articles the past few days, reading about this stuff, and there seems like every prophet, basically all of the prophets, it seems like there is some sort of agreement that none of them are exactly what it was in its original form.
Absolutely.
All of them have been at some point redacted, added.
Yep.
altered or something, some change into they're all basically rolling text.
No question. And I totally agree with that. Scholars work very hard to try and see those pieces, right?
Oh, I totally get
Stuff that's been redacted, and we can even talk about a few of those. In particular, when you get to the book of Jeremiah, which is where I spend most of my time most of my scholarship in the prophets. But you can't just, what you can't do is you can't just look at every one of these hints or echoes of this early tradition and say, this must have been inserted, or this must have been added, because
you know who does that is the Copenhagen school that does that. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yes.
A bit of biblical.
No,
they don't give it. They're like, if there's any suggestion that this is mentioning Moses or the Torah, it's Hellenistic.
Later.
Yeah. Which I'm willing to go. I'm willing to say they seem a little biased. I'm also reading their stuff. I think I want to hear what they think on almost all matters. But I do see why someone like you would say, why are you just assuming that it's later? So I want to hear out. That's why we're having this talk right now. But go ahead.
So listen, now I'll say this, like my doctor father was George Brooke at the University of Manchester, and one of his very best friends in the world was the late Philip R. Davies.
Copenhagen.
One of these great figures in the Copenhagen school, brilliant scholar. I had the occasion on a few times to have lunch with Philip Davies while I was doing my PhD at Manchester, and he was just kind of, he was coming out of this season of for sort of the last part of his academic, like his professional career. While he was still working, he spent a lot of his time working out this minimalist position. He wrote a bunch of important books and articles, which are really, really useful. One of my favorites is oh shoot, what is it called? It's basically the invention of the sons of Israel. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the title offhand. Anyways,
I think he's a mythicist too, right?
What's that?
I think he might be a mythicist too.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I know Carrier and Raphael Lataster have claimed that he delivered this deathbed confession about becoming a mythicist just to them, right?
Right.
Now and here's what I'll like I'm glad you brought that up, because I think this feeds into a little bit about what I want to say about Philip Davies based on my own personal experience. Really interesting guy, but so much of his personality, so much of his scholarship was about I heard someone recently describe it as trolling, in the sense that he was all about pushing boundaries and seeing how far, like testing the testing the structural integrity of this thing that we call biblical scholarship, and let's see how far we can push it before it breaks. I think this is what minimalism was for him. Was him basically going, you guys are lazy, you're not working hard enough, and here's why, and you need to work harder. And that's essentially what the contribution of minimalism has done for biblical scholarship. I mean, it's become, I wouldn't say it's mainstream, but you certainly have it's certainly entered the conversation in such a way that it's something that everybody takes seriously, and it's pushed everyone in the field to very much more carefully think through their own presuppositions with regards to how they're reading these texts, right? So, but I think,
someone like him was around for Endeavor.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's now made it so there is this extreme end, And this is he's in the realm of plausibility. It's not like what he's saying is possible. So it's now we have that. Like it's possible that the whole Bible, in the form that we have it, is Hellenistic.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's a guarantee. I'm saying it's possible.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
So, and I'll say one more thing about Philip here. When I met him, towards the end of, like, while he was contemplating and entering retirement, it's kind of funny because he was just coming out of this whole minimalist debate with Devers and some of these other people like Albright. I think Albright was dead by then. But anyways, he when I asked him, what he was going to do in retirement, his response was, I don't know. I've never spent any time in the New Testament. Maybe I'll just go poke around there for a little while. And sure enough, he started doing much the same sort of thing, right? Kicking in doors and getting after people for being lazy and for it's good. I like it too. It's one of those, it's a necessary thing, right? Like, we all need these correctives to sort of keep us on track and ensure that our work is robust. So, but I'm going to get back to this prophecy in Hosea, and I'm going to finish this section, and then I'll point something out to you here, which makes me feel quite strongly that this probably wasn't just inserted and redacted whole cloth. Okay. So he continues here. So you must return to your God. Keep faith and justice. Set your hope continuously on your God. Canaan has in his hand false balances. He loves to extort. So Ephraim has said, yes, I am rich. I've sought power for myself. All of my property they cannot hold against me for wrongdoing, which is sin. I, Yahweh, am your God, ever since the land of Egypt. I will settle you once again in tents, as in the days of old, when I spoke to prophets, when I increased visions, parables by the hands of prophets. But in Gilead is iniquity. They are utterly worthless. In Gilgal they sacrifice bulls, so their altars are like heaps on the ridges of the field. Jacob fled to the field of Aram. Israel slaved for a woman. For a woman he kept sheep. By a prophet, Yahweh brought Israel up from Egypt. By a prophet he was kept. Ephraim has provoked fury. His blood is cast down upon him, and his Lord will turn his shame against him. Now, what I will say is, if this is something that I thought was significantly redacted or just totally reworked in like a Persian, post-Babylonian Persian Hellenistic period, something that would quite surprise me is the fact that here we have a description of pretty clear traditions of Exodus, and yet without an identification of Moses. In fact, you'll notice that in the text here, he's just there's just an anonymous prophet by Yahweh bringing Israel out of Egypt. And this is also kind of in keeping with what I would say are the earliest depictions, the earliest hints of this Moses figure, which I think appear probably in like the early layers of Deuteronomy, where Moses is quite frequently called a prophet. So what I'm suggesting here is Hosea is speaking this oracle. It's getting written down, during his lifetime, shortly after his lifetime. And he's drawing from an Exodus tradition, something that's there that the people know. He's identifying this figure, but this figure doesn't have a name yet. He's not Moses, at least not yet. Right? As early as the 9th century, I would say there's someone there.
I would agree with that. I would agree that because I don't think any of these traditions just are created overnight. I think they all develop. I think that some of them taking centuries to develop, and they're just sort of formulating based on the culture, and they just sort of build on it. Just builds and builds and builds. We see this with Greek. We see this with Latin. We see this with Sanskrit. literature with the Vedas. They're having the same debate in the Vedic scholarship world. So there's people who go all the way to 1500 BCE. They say that's what we dated to. That's the Vedic period. And then there's people who say, oh, it's probably 500 BC. That's a 1,000-year gap in between. And then there's like people in between saying, oh, it's being. So I was reading about that, and there's a lot of these Sanskrit grammarians.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of these people. Panini's the famous one. He lived in like the 500s BC, but he's a Sanskrit grammarian, and he's writing about the Vedas. So at least the time, it has to be like we're full stop. The Vedas existed in Panini's time, and so now we're talking about prophets in Israel mentioning stories that sort of seem like they align with what we find in Genesis.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that at all. I think that's just normal, everyday. That's regular. Every part of the world has some sort of form of this, where a culture is flipping over time.
Yeah. Now, something else that you have when you get to, so that's 9th and 8th century, right? When you get to the 7th century, then you start to have something that we have in the book of Jeremiah are actual citations of texts that we identify as Torah, right? For example, in Jeremiah chapter 4, let me just pull this up. Let me get the verse right here. Jeremiah makes a very clear reference, almost a direct citation, not quite. It's more of a paraphrase.
The one we talked about.
What's that?
This is the one you and I were talking about when
we probably talked about this on Messenger. This is
all right. Go ahead. Yeah,
this is part of an oracle that Jeremiah delivered, where he is paraphrasing parts of the creation story that appears in Genesis chapter 1.
I disagree. This is where we're going to disagree. This is going to be
dispute this one. You think this was added later?
No, I don't think it's added. I just don't think he's citing Genesis here.
Oh, I don't know. When you read, and here's the thing.
Let me hear you argue it again, fresh, and then we'll go.
Okay. So here he's speaking this oracle. Scholars are generally agreed that this is an oracle that was delivered on the basically on the brink of the first invasion of Babylon on Jerusalem in 597. Okay. And here he says, disaster overtakes disaster. I'm reading from the Jewish Publication Society. For all the land has been ravaged. Suddenly my tents have been ravaged. In a moment, my tent cloths. How long must I see standards and hear the blare of horns? For my people are stupid. They give me no heed. They are foolish children. They are not intelligent. They are clever at doing wrong, but unable to do right. God, I love Jeremiah. Sorry. So here is what he says. I look to the earth. It is unformed and void. At the skies, and their light is gone. I look at the mountains, and they are quaking, and the hills are rocking. I look, no man is left, and the birds of the sky have fled. And I look, the farmland is desert, and all the towns are in ruins because of Yahweh, because of his blazing anger. So many of these, like a number of the reason why I think this is a pretty strong correlation is because you've got a collection of Hebrew phrases strung together, which only appear here and in Genesis chapter 1. So
let's look at
and again, by and large, scholars are largely agreed that when Jeremiah is uttering this oracle, he's got this creation tradition in his head.
All right. So you're talking about the formless word, right? He says
tohu v'bohu ve'el hashemayim ve'ein uram. Like that's all Genesis 1 language. And it's not just tohu v'bohu, right? It's the el hashemayim ve'ein uram.
That's surprising.
There's the earth and the skies. There is no light.
That's surprising. That's Hebrew right there. I'm just
What's
kidding.
that?
That just surprised you that I knew where to go? No, that's because we looked at this
Oh,
already.
nice. Very good. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we looked at this already. So this is what you're talking about right here.
Yep.
All right.
Sorry, I'm not looking at my screen. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I don't understand what the argument is here, to be honest. Maybe I'm just not, because I'm
the argument. So the argument here is that Jeremiah is taking this creation tradition, this existing creation tradition, probably didn't look exactly like this, right? But he's got this creation tradition of the foundation of the heavens and the earth, out of this tohu vabohu, the formation of the animals and the birds, and the entrance of light into the world. That's kind of what this tradition looks like. And then he's spinning that on his head and saying, create, in the destruction of Jerusalem, with the destruction of the city and the impending destruction of the temple, although it didn't happen just yet, he's saying this is like a reversal of creation. Everything is going back to this state, to the tohu vabohu. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm seeing is, because this is about creation. So the only words that line up here is unformed and void, tohu vabohu.
No, hashamayim va'et haaretz. You've got the emergence and the extinguishing of light.
All right, what's the Jeremiah verse? Where's the Jeremiah verse?
It's Jeremiah 4:23.
4:23.
And I could read it to you. Ra'iti et hashamayim v'hinei tohu vabohu ve'el hashamayim ve'ein oram. Ra'iti hecharam v'hinei ro'ashim v'kol ha'gevaot. Oh shit.
Okay.
Hit kal kolu. So like it's now these are, what I'm saying here is it's not a direct quotation. I know I said it was almost, but it's not. But there is a clear correspondence, not just of tohu vabohu, but of a number of these key terms together. The earth and the sky, the light, the tohu vabohu, and then you've got him talking about what's that?
They're up. One of them is about creation. The other one's he's about to get destroyed.
Yes, exactly. And this is what
I get what you're getting. Okay, I didn't know what you meant by
this is what he's doing, right? He's taking this creation tradition and saying, in this crisis that we're experiencing with the Babylonians bearing down on us and about ready to demolish our city, creation is becoming undone. This story about the order and the harmony of the universe that God built into the cosmos, it's breaking apart because of what Babylon is doing. So he's using this, and this is quite typical of Hebrew prophecy by and large, to use these traditions as they riff on them, right? They'll pull out pre-existing stuff, and they'll riff it, and they'll turn it in an effort to communicate their message. So
now the only thing that I'm going to say here, because we got the earth was unformed and void on Genesis 2.
Yep.
And then in Jeremiah it says, I beheld the earth, and it was waste, and it's the tohu vabohu. Heavens, they had no light. So the only thing I'm seeing, it sounds like it's because he uses tohu vabohu, that makes it sound like he's citing it. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm convinced about that though.
But what do you do with the string of terms here that, like, not just tohu vabohu, but the combination of et hashamayim ve'et haaretz? You've got the Elohim yehya'ur ve'yehi-ur, the creation of light. It's those features, right? It's the earth, the sky, the chaos, and the light all together in this cluster, like within the first 20 words of Genesis. All those things take place.
Do you want to know what I honestly think? As someone who's read probably 20 or 30 creation myths, at least. I don't even know how many. Probably 20 or at this point. That seems to be a common. Now we're talking two texts in Hebrew. Now it's different than jumping from language, which is I get. All right, I'm sort of understanding it. I would like to see it to be like literally citing it. Like literally, like I know that's asking for a lot, but I mean that I would expect that for a citation. But what it does tell me is that there could have been, because creation myths always existed. So whether Genesis existed in the form that we have it in Genesis 2, there might have been a different form of Genesis to Jeremiah. That
I agree.
Similar language.
I agree. So he's like,
let me give you an example of something real quick. This is from the same text that I was talking about before, the Rig Veda. It's one of the oldest creation epics we have. And just listen. And I know it's a Sanskrit. We're not even in Semitic anymore. We're in Indo-European. But just hear me out. Just listen to this. He says that not even non-existence there was, nor existence, no air then, no space beyond it. What covered it? What was it? Was there then cosmic fluid in depths unfathomed? Then there was neither death nor immortality, nor was there torch in the day of night. The one breathed windlessly and self-sustaining. Then was that one then, and there was no other. At first there was only darkness wrapped in darkness, and all of this only unillumined the cosmic water. And this is such. These tropes are so common in creation stories about there being some chaos, cosmic waters. So and the only reason why I'm bringing that up is because this, to me, what I think is going on here is whenever Jeremiah is writing to has at his disposal some sort of creation epic with all these similar tropes that we get, going back to Sumer, going back to Sanskrit, going back to whatever, Mycenaean Greeks.
Why not? We have a text, an existing Hebrew text, because I'm just using Occam's razor here. Jeremiah's drawing from a creation tradition. You and I can agree on that, right?
Yes.
We have an existing creation tradition with.
Let me say that if he truly is, I'm willing to grant, if he truly is doing some sort of polemic there, like he's turning a creation story into a destruction story, that's possible. If that's the case,
that's absolutely what he's doing.
If we assume that's the case, then yes, I would say he's got some sort of creation epic in front of him that he knows.
We have a creation epic written in Hebrew, which looks very similar to what he's saying. Why wouldn't we just say this is what he's doing?
Because there's a lot more in Genesis than just the creation myth.
Oh, yes. Okay. So now maybe we should translate. Now I'll just say a couple more things about pre-existing traditions, and maybe we can talk about what's going on here. So we also have, like, Jeremiah cites, and I don't know if you want to go through these in depth, but Jeremiah cites slave laws from Deuteronomy chapter 15, and those are almost verbatim. He also knew of Moses and Samuel. He makes mention of them in the same passage in Jeremiah chapter 15. So now, what did I guess the question is, what did Jeremiah have? What was there?
Yeah, what?
And
do you think it was the Genesis in the form that we have it? I would say
no.
Hell no.
Absolutely not. So let's talk a little bit about that. Now I've got kind of worked out here. Maybe before we go there, should we? Let's see. How do I want to do this? So yeah, okay. Let's start there. So here's what I think. I think that in the 9th to the 8th century, you've got these circulating traditions, right? That appear to pop up in the prophets, foundational traditions of the patriarchs in the Exodus. You've got an emerging mythology, and here is where I would talk more about the sources of the Pentateuch, because one of the things that needs to be taken seriously in this conversation too is the enormous amount of source criticism that has been, that takes place in the Pentateuch in particular.
Enormous. What do you mean by enormous?
I mean the enormous amounts of work that have been done on teasing out the pre-existing layers that we now identify. Most people talk about these as the documentary sources, right?
Okay.
JEDMP. Most scholars nowadays talk about a priestly text, a priestly document of some sort, and a non-priestly document that were pieced together, and then a bunch of other traditions were thrown on top of them. You've probably got some sort of a law code. I think it likely looked something like the covenant code in Exodus chapter 20.
Just to get that out the way, every city has a law code. So you can assume that no matter what. There's going to be some law code. Yeah.
I think there's some early royal annals as well. Is likely
standard
from which the Deuteronomistic history was written. But they were using these.
This is going to get into my big criticism or my big reasoning for why I date it later, because the big question that I'm asking, I think the question I'm asking, I think the only thing I can do is ask questions with what I. And the question is, who are the prophets writing to? That's what I'm trying to.
Who are the prophets writing to in this early period?
What I mean by that is it a priestly class? Is it some sort of
most likely? Yeah,
because if it's for the average Joe,
no, not at all, right? And I think this is really important to and it's good that you brought that up. I'm entering this part of in the book I'm working on now. I'm writing a couple chapters right now about what's taking place in the royal court and the temple, and what's happening for the general populace. It's not the same thing, right? Let's like just briefly. So I'll say a couple things, and then I'll get to that. So we've got the existence of some sort of royal annals, and right around the 8th century, we know of this is history. This is what we know. We know that the city of Samaria was destroyed by the Assyrians in 722 BCE. We also know that the city of Samaria had some sort of apparatus of Yahweh worship in place. And then what we also know is that in the vacuum created by the destruction of Samaria and also of Damascus, Judah kind of came to fill that. For the first time, the city of Jerusalem became the leading power in the area. And one of the reasons for that was, because somebody had to fill this resource vacuum that was created by the destruction of these other two kingdoms, but also huge numbers of people escaping the Assyrian invasion in the north fled south.
Right.
And the city of Jerusalem, I've seen some suggest that the city of Jerusalem increased 10 times in size in like a 20 to 30 year period. During this time, it just kind of exploded and became this thriving city. Now, I won't go through the text, but you can pick out some of these elements, in particular in the book of Isaiah. The prophet Isaiah from the 8th century seems to have had, along with this massive incursion of northerners into the south, he starts to have this vision for, and I'm speaking of a vision in the metaphorical sense that we do, right? Like a mandate or a goal. He seems to start to have this vision of a grand unified Israel, all worshiping Yahweh together. And I think that's where you get a lot of the the combination and the increased circulation of traditions. But importantly, this is all stuff that's taking place just within this little cloistered, this little cloistered aristocracy. The temple in Jerusalem was a royal chapel, as most of the Phoenician, Canaanite temple establishments were. They were connected directly to the court of the king. They weren't public buildings, and this was the religious establishment of the ruling house, right? As a result of this, it was very exclusive. It was very small. It was very limited. It did not stretch out onto the masses.
Right.
They were all doing their own thing, and for the most part, I think the rulers didn't tend to care. You've got some exceptions to that. In particular, I tend to think Josiah's reforms. There's an historical kernel there. One of the things you read in 2 Kings chapter 23, when it talks about the reforms of Josiah, it says that he took he took the Asherah pole out of the temple of Yahweh in Jerusalem, which was probably just the temple of a whole bunch of gods that they were worshiping. Right. Took the Asherah pole out. He ground it up. He burned it into ashes. And then it says he took the ashes and he scattered them on the graves of the common people, of the people of the land. Now, what kind of a message does that send? This is very much the king thumbing his nose at all those people out there who aren't, who are just doing their own thing, right?
Right.
We've got our own little shrines and our own little pedestals and sacrifice platforms, and we're worshiping Asherah and Baal and Yahweh and all, whoever, right? Here comes the king and basically says, here's what I think of you, and but religious practices, scatters the ashes on the graves of the people. I think there's an element of there's an echo of something that actually happened in there.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know. I mean, I do think I can see why that could be a later narrative too, because there's sort of the idea that it goes along with the idea that they're not following the statutes of Moses, and they're all acting up and doing what they want, and therefore this happened. But at the same time, I also think that there tends to be this elitist upper class priests and kings and whatever that sort of
and these were the same people, because if you fast forward now to the 6th century, right?
Well, before Jerusalem, I want to. Okay, it's important that I think there's a misconception that everyone assumes that there's a monolith happening in Canaan or Israel.
Yeah, right.
And everyone's they all have a copy of the Torah in their house.
No, let's be clear. This is not.
Yeah, from 1300 BC till the time that the Second Temple or whatever. It's what you would get from the but the truth is, on the ground, what the evidence shows, what the archaeology shows, is that they're worshiping all types of different gods.
Yes,
Ishtar, Baal, all types of whatever.
If you read, and if you read carefully, if you read the text carefully, the text is telling you that too.
Right.
Right. It is. Yeah. It's just what the text is doing is saying this is terrible.
The text is trying to say,
absolutely not the way things were supposed to be. But
the text is trying to say we knew the whole time this was bad.
Yeah. Exactly. I
think is a later narrative.
So absolutely, and you've got a lot of really interesting things going on throughout the larger biblical narrative with regards to the importance of worship. You've got the temple in Jerusalem, which always takes priority, but you've got these other places. There's there is a and we know of this from archaeology as well. There is an apparatus of Yahweh worship in Samaria, as I mentioned. You've got the shrine in Shiloh, which was very ancient, active, sometime between the 13th and the 10th centuries. Very old.
I think the Midianites is where Yahweh comes from.
Yes, I do too. And I think he probably ended up, the concentration was probably up in the north first. You've got you've got Samaria, you've got Shiloh, which is closer to Samaria than it is Jerusalem. You've got Bethel, which is another important place of worship. You've got these rival priestly groups, the Levites and the sons of Aaron,
but in Ugarit, there's no Yahweh. It's Baal, El, Asherah, Yam. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
Whole pantheon of gods, no Yahweh.
So
that tells me that Yahweh is from the south.
Yes,
because we do have those texts. We have the Egyptian one where it says the land of Shashu, and the nomads, they worship Yahweh, Yahu. So the Yahweh's
got the Kentulit Ashrud, and inscriptions.
Exactly.
With the mention of Yahweh.
The evidence is pretty clear that Yahweh comes up from the south and sort of usurps the whole pantheon.
I think Yahweh is actually mentioned on the Misha inscription as well. So, which is pretty interesting. This inscription from
that's everywhere though. I think that's 9th century, right? Yeah.
Yep, 9th century. So everywhere within this small little region.
Right.
But yeah, that's my thinking. Is it comes up from Edom in the south, and this is within our earliest traditions too, right? The Song of Deborah actually says Yahweh comes from Edom. It comes out of Edom. Is the way the Song of Deborah,
which is kind of where the Midianites are from.
Edom. Same with the Song of Moses, which it's just a title, right? It's in its earliest stage. There's no mention of Moses in the song. It's an old text. Also talks about Yahweh emerging out of the south, so out of the desert, right? He's like this nomadic desert god of the people who live in that region of the Transjordan and the south, makes his way up north into Samaria, where it becomes quite popular, really gets a foothold in the Jerusalem temple. Although I think there was Yahweh worship in Judah as well. I think it starts to become quite dominant only after this migration, right? Following the Assyrian invasion. So like these are the roots. And let's be clear, I've been talking just about collections of traditions. I think they exist in text forms of some sort. I think we can access them in broad outlines. We can see some traces of things that are there. It's not clearly or really well developed, and then you've got all this stuff taking place after Samaria is gone. Jerusalem gets destroyed by the Babylonians in the 7th century. Hundreds and thousands of people are shipped off to Babylon. And these are all it's important to recognize who these people are, right? This is the royal family. This is, all of his rich friends. These are all the members of the priesthood. Anybody, because this is part of Babylonian policy, anybody who posed a threat to the empire, who posed a threat of rebellion, who had the resources and the skills and the training to be able to resist. The Babylonians said, no, we're just taking them with us. Right? We're going to keep them close, keep your enemies close. So this was all the leading people from the city that they took with them to Babylon, leaving behind, the farmers and the goat herders and, the merchants and those people, right? Who were part of this populist class that probably never had anything to do with, the Jerusalem temple or anything like that.
Who do you think is going down to Elephantine? Just random people from?
No. So I think this sparks a migration too. When Jerusalem is destroyed, I think there's a dispersion. And we see this sort of happening in the Persian period where, Jeremiah talks about people taking him down to Egypt, to Taphanes. I think that's where the Elephantine Yahwists come from. They end up there as a result of this. Right. And I think this is probably pretty typical that there's pockets of these communities of people that came out of the ruins of Jerusalem, probably mostly along the Mediterranean coast there to the south and into Egypt. And then east in Babylon. I don't know how far north, but
now obviously one of the biggest reasons of why and by the way, for anyone who's wondering what I mean by Persian to Hellenistic period, I simply mean between 550 to 300 BC. I'm saying somewhere in between there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just telling that for the people who are like, what is he talking about, Persian period or the Hellenistic period? My main reason for dating the text, at least the Torah, and I'd say the finished product of the prophets come in that period too. Not the whole thing, just the finished product. But the reason why is Elephantine, and I just think there's a lot going on in Elephantine. We have a lot of material to go off of. What's the word? What's the scientific word?
Material culture.
Well, yeah, there's
that's usually what I use.
You have a lot of
graphic remains.
When you have a lot, like when you do a study and you have a lot of polls going on, there's like the abundance is high. What's the word for that? I don't know. We have a lot to go off. We have a lot of material.
Oh, the sample size? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, the sample size is
We have a huge. So here's my argument. This is basically getting to it.
Yep.
Elephantine is, first of all, we have about a century and a half worth of data, about 1,000 texts, roughly, give or take. So between ostraca, full-blown papyri, engravings on stones and all this stuff, we have tons of text. We know what their culture was. We have letters from Darius. We have all these different stuff. And my whole problem with this is they don't talk about the prophets. They don't talk about Moses. They're not like, oh, Jeremiah was a great in our grandfather's day. They're not doing anything like that.
Right. And I agree. And I think the reason for that is it has more to do with what I would call the cosmopolitan nature of like religion in the area during the period, like leading up to this. When we look at like the Bible, the Hebrew Bible presents itself. It presents the religious history of this period as if it was always about Yahweh and just Yahweh, and we have all these other problems with these other gods, but it's always just Yahweh, right? And we're collecting these traditions, and we have these great stories, and that's kind of the picture you're presented in the Bible. When in actual fact, I think that's just a tiny little sliver, right? I think lots of this stuff you can trace back pretty early, but it does not go far. It stays, like I said, pretty cloistered. This is all probably stuff I don't know enough about who the people at Elephantine were, but I suspect these are probably people who did not come out of the courts of Zedekiah when
they did have a temple of Yah.
They had a temple, yeah. And
I'm not sure how accurate this is, but this is like a cool looking one that gives people an idea of the dates and all that stuff. They had a temple of Yahweh. So
and they were worshiping more than just Yahweh there.
They're worshiping Yahweh. I think the temple of Yahweh was just for Yahweh, though.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
They do have some recollection of what was going on in Jerusalem.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And they have correspondences with the priests in Jerusalem.
Right.
Excuse me. So
writing back and
now
we have those.
Yes. we also have a temple. This is a little bit later, but by the I think it's by the early 3rd century, you also now have a temple of Yahweh in Leontopolis, which is in Egypt. And in 380 BCE, you have a temple of Yahweh that was constructed in Samaria with Persian support.
Yeah.
So like you've got kind of you've got this pluralistic sense of like Jerusalem's not the center, right? It's not all about the temple in Jerusalem, but you've got these Yahweh communities. I think too, these are probably the sources, not these specific communities, but we have individual communities are the sources of the text that we do have.
Yes, we agree on that.
Yes.
That's what I think. So, I think as they're coming back, they start write mythology and rewrite, and a lot of this stuff is older, and they're looking back, and they're probably do have sources from whatever, but I think they're rewriting a whole. I think they're writing a whole new sphere of mythology.
They are supplementing, and they are adapting, and they are adding. And now this is where one of the like Genesis, the book of Genesis, is a bit of a problem, because now I tend to think the book of Genesis more so than some of the other Torah texts. For instance, I think Deuteronomy might be the earliest actual completed book of the 5. If we're talking about the 5 books now, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, I think Deuteronomy is probably the earliest one of those that achieves the form that it's in now. I think Genesis might be the latest in terms of achieving that final form. And what we've got happening in Genesis is a lot of this late influence. I've talked a little bit about one of my favorite texts in Genesis is the genealogy of the Seth. I think it's called the Sethite genealogy. This is the text where you have all those long ages, right?
Yeah.
So this text, if you do the math, which is kind of fun, there's these complicated mathematical formulas about how to understand the long ages that are attributed to the pre-Diluvian patriarchs. If you do the math there, and then you look at Berosus's version of the Sumerian Kings List. The Sumerian Kings List is
they line up
very, very old, but yeah. Berosus's version looks like what's happening in Genesis, and that suggests to me that this is happening, 3rd, 2nd century BCE. Right. However, now I'll also say I think that there's stuff in the book of Genesis that echoes a lot of earlier things too. I set the story of the Tower of Babel.
You said Berosus though, so
I did.
What Berosus tells us. Okay, so Berosus has the flood myth. He rewrites the one about Zeostradra from the Eridu Genesis. He talks. He writes it in Greek as Kisithros, and this is at the end of the flood myth. He lets off birds and waits 7 days, and he lands in the mountains of Armenia, called the Corcyraean Mountains. So you have landing in the mountains of Armenia, letting off birds, waiting 7 days, flood.
Yep.
Ark. So and this is what the thing. The reason why I think this is important is because a lot of times when we have the conversation about Noah's Ark going back to Epic of Gilgamesh and all this Enuma Elish, they don't have to go back that far. Now it's a fact that those stories originate there, no doubt. We don't have to go back that far. We have those stories still exist. The Greeks mention Gilgamesh in one of their in a couple of their texts. So Gilgamesh is known in the Hellenistic era still. There's when they dug up the Ashurbanipal library, which was, I think it was destroyed in around 612, I think, something like that. They have Enki and Nima there. They have a version
Oh
of
yeah.
Gilgamesh there. So these stories are being passed down through the centuries, and a lot
Yeah.
of them make it to the Hellenistic period.
Yeah.
Here's the last thing I want to say. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay.
I think there's clear examples of euhemerization happening in Genesis, where you find stories of that sound like what you would get in older stories from the gods, but they're now being told as Abraham or Joseph or Jacob or one of them. I don't know if you're familiar with the story called the Kypria or the Kupria in Greek. It's one of these old Homeric, archaic Greek stories dated to like 750 BC. It's the prequel to the Homer's Iliad. It's a tribute. It's attributed to Homer. We have it in fragments, but we have enough fragments where we can put it all back together. Agamemnon, he's told that he has to sacrifice his daughter for Artemis, and he takes his daughter Iphigenia, brings her up on a mountain. This is very specific. Ties her up to some wood, a bale of wood, pulls out a knife, is about to stab her throat, and an angel stops him, and then replaces Iphigenia with a deer.
Yeah. Wow.
So there's a lot.
That sounds very similar, right? To the what's called the Akada, the binding.
Now that doesn't mean that they're borrowing it from the Greek, but what it does mean is these stories exist in forms all over the place. The Hittites,
for sure.
People forget about the Hittites. The Hittites are Indo-European speakers, and they're right above Canaan. Like the Egyptians it goes the Egyptians, Canaan, Hittites. They're they're in between the Hittites and the Egyptians. So they're surrounded by Indo-European culture. Greeks are all the way in Cyprus. That island is right there. It's right off the border. I mean, that's their neighbors. I mean, they're speaking the same language as the Mycenaeans and the Minoans before that. So the culture is way more connected than people try to.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And yeah, I absolutely agree. That there is, and this is why, like, when it comes to some of this conversation, I think it's important to make this distinction between I like there's a few things going on here, right? Like where do these traditions come from? How old can we trace them? Some of them, like I said, like I've been saying for a bit here, I think you can set them pretty far back. You know, the and for example, one I was thinking of within the book of Genesis, right? I think the Tower of Babel story is an exilic story that's deeply influenced by events taking place in the Neo-Babylonian Empire. The story of well, what I would call the non-P formative material, what most people would call as J, which kind of has a sort of an almost unbroken run from Genesis 2 through Genesis 12. This is a block of material. It's pretty consistent with you know, in terms of what's there. And this is, I think, read or written in large part as a form or a polemic against, or in in contrast to something like the Epic of Gilgamesh. And then from like a socioeconomic perspective as well, one of the things that we see within a story like that is this what I call sort of an anti-urban polemic, which I think has its roots in like in the very distant past, out of the, you know, one of the theories that scholars has with regards to the emergence of the Israelites is that all these people are all Canaanites, And what we see taking place in the region right after the Bronze Age collapse, in the 12th century BCE, and then leading into sort of the beginning of the Iron Age, one of the things that we see is sort of this explosion of population in the highlands outside. There's just a massive increase rather suddenly of all these villages, these highland settlements outside of the Canaanite cities, the cities of the plain, of the Jordan River Valley, the cities of the Shephelah and the coast. And I think there's echoes of this, in some of these early layers of Genesis, where you have a socioeconomic movement away from the city into the highlands and the country. There's this nomadic sort of spirit that undergirds a lot of this material too, in the narratives, right? So not to say that I would certainly I'm not saying I would set Genesis chapter 2 through 12 in the at the beginning of the Iron Age. No. But what I do think is that you've got some of this stuff coming out of that sort of an ethos, at a later period of time, yes, but still preserving some of these traditions, and in conversation in contrast to the Epic of Gilgamesh. The neat thing about the Epic of Gilgamesh, for those who don't know, the story begins and ends exactly the same way. The words are almost exactly the same. The story begins with Gilgamesh walking around the city of Uruk and admiring the towers and the walls and the way it's laid out, what a perfect place it is. And I won't go through the whole story, but
I agree with basic. I agree with you 100%.
What's that?
I agree with you 100%. Yeah. It lines up, but here's the big thing.
But I was just I was going to say one more thing about what's going on in the Epic of Gilgamesh before you continue. Gilgamesh goes on this pursuit of eternal life. He's looking for meaning. He's looking for eternal life, and ends up back in the city of Uruk, and finds meaning, finds his purpose in his mind, I think, in the eternal city in Uruk. So the book ends exactly the same. It is a tribute to the city, to civilization, right? And that's, you've got this unraveling of this idea throughout these early parts of Genesis.
And there's a lot of classicists Maria Bakhfarova, Martin West, who are arguing that Epic of Gilgamesh has a lot of influence over the epics about Jason, and Homer's Iliad having some stuff there too. But here's the thing that I agree with you 100%. But what I think when people have this conversation, they'll say Epic of Gilgamesh. Oh, that's like a Bronze Age text, right? And it is. But we also
still knew it.
Exactly. We found a fragment. It's in the British Museum right now. It was found in 1870. I'm looking at my notes right now. It's dated somewhere between 600 to 100 BC.
Yeah.
So they haven't did a full. No one. I don't think they did a full investigation, but they that's a big 500-year gap. But still, what that tells me is that Epic of Gil. And by the way, we already mentioned that Gilgamesh is cited by Greeks and Latins. He's mentioned in a Latin text by Aelian on the De Natura Annalium.
In the Dead Sea Scrolls as well.
Mentioned in the Dead Sea. I figured you'd say that. He's mentioned it. Yeah. People know who Gilgamesh is.
Oh, sure.
All the way down to the Hellenistic period, people know who Gilgamesh. They didn't forget who he was. And yeah, we have that fragment that I don't know when it dates, somewhere between probably Persian period. And so and I think that needs to be said every time we do this comparison. Not every time, but I think people should know. When we're looking at, the Genesis has all these old Bronze Age stories in there. Well, yeah, they're Bronze Age stories, but those Bronze Age stories are so popular and they're so widespread that they still exist in 300 BC.
Yeah. It's called the Epic of Gilgamesh is often called the greatest ancient story ever written, or
it's
the oldest, most popular myth of, and it's for this reason, right? It spread everywhere, and it endured for like literally thousands of years. People were still copying it and
tragedy.
reading it, and yeah, it's pretty wild. So, do you want to listen? Do you want to talk? Because I think it's important if we can shift gears a little bit and talk about what I think is going on when it comes to the Torah as a
Yeah,
body of
let's just
literature.
lay our arguments down on what we think is going on, but you can go first.
Yeah, sure. So, um, and here actually, if you could, so I I think the Torah, the collection. When we're talking about the Torah, what I'm talking about is the collection of these 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, together as a group, as a body, as a text. Um, Now, I think that these texts do exist independently prior to that.
So do I.
They probably, I think you can date Deuteronomy pretty early, and then the other texts. And when I say pretty early, I think you've got something that looks like the Book of Deuteronomy as early as the end of the pre-exilic period. But then these other texts, and this is all these texts emerge through piecing together these early traditions and massively rewriting and redacting them over time, right? So what I think happens though, and here's what, and I'll talk a little bit about what we've got, because um, this is where the Dead Sea Scrolls are really important to this conversation, because all of our earliest manuscript evidence comes from Qumran. We've got, and maybe now is the time to start showing some pictures, Neal. So if you could pull up the first image,
This one?
not that one, no,
Oh,
the link,
okay.
yeah. If you could pull that one up. So this first one,
This one, right?
is no, actually.
Oh, okay.
So it's that one. Yeah. And if you there should be a full screen option in the bottom right, I think. There you go. And then you can zoom in on it. There should be a zoomer. Yeah, sure. So it looks terrible, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
This is probably the oldest manuscript at Qumran. And this is a copy of the book of Exodus. This is 4Q17, and or I should say, the really interesting thing about this text,
I see a lot
is,
right there, a Lamed, but I can't tell what the hell this is.
so much of it, that's actually a mem right next to it.
Oh,
and then a hey, and then a tav. So
I can probably read.
can you read that?
Arids? Is that Earth?
No.
That's not.
That's an Aleph.
That's
and
not.
then
It's not a Resh.
No, it's not. That's actually
Bob?
that's actually a chet followed by a tav.
I can't read that shit.
So no, it's brutal. And one of the reasons it's brutal is because this text is quite old. So this is it dates to about 250, or maybe somewhere between 200 to 250 BCE. The really remarkable thing about this text is it is a copy of the book of Exodus and Leviticus together. We actually have the very end of the book of Exodus. There's some fragments from it that contain text from Exodus 39, 40. How many chapters are I think it's just 40 in Exodus, isn't it? And then after that, we've got some fragments with text from Leviticus chapter 1 all the way through to parts of chapter 2. But the really exciting thing about this manuscript is that this is not just our very earliest copy of a Torah text from anywhere. It's actually a copy of what's probably a Torah of some sort, in that it's got Exodus followed by Leviticus, right?
That makes sense.
And we don't know now. We don't know. Maybe it was just a scroll containing those two books. I tend to think it might have been larger than that. And the reason being, so when scholars have reconstructed this manuscript, we've managed to reconstruct it to 60 lines in a column, which is quite big. That's quite high. And in so doing, you can fit quite a bit of material in there. So that's the first one. If you could show the next one, and that would be
right here.
Yeah, I think it's that one. So this is 4Q11.
Oh, I could see a little bit better on this one. I could see.
So, and you should. I suspect you won't be able to read this one because it's written in Paleo Hebrew.
Yeah, but I think I can pick that up. That's a vav, or that's a vav, right?
Nice. Yes.
Yeah, because the vowels are different. This is I N. There's a dot there.
Yeah, good. So the cool thing, this manuscript, a couple of the texts that are written in this later Paleo Hebrew,
look at that
script,
old
preserved
old Hadas.
Yeah, you got it.
You want to know what? You want to know? You can if you know Greek,
I know it.
If you know Greek, you can learn Paleo Hebrew a lot easier because
yeah, I bet
Paleo
there's some influence there too.
Yeah, it looks closer to archaic Greek than it does.
Yeah,
because they're both using the Phoenician alphabet.
Right.
It's Phoenician. That's what it is.
So that's what it is. You notice the dot. You'll notice a handful of dots all over the place. These are word separators, right? And they don't actually come later. We see word separators in Hebrew inscriptions.
Yeah, I heard
like from the early Iron Age, right?
Yeah.
So now this manuscript is quite a bit later. It dates to about 75 BCE. This is 4Q11. But this is just one fragment of it. There's tons of fragments, and it contains text from Genesis chapter 50 all the way through Exodus chapter 36. So here's another example of a text that has, multiple books of the Torah on it in 70 BCE. And then I'll get you to show just the next one is so that's the picture that I sent you.
Want the next one? Oh, you want the picture now?
Is the picture? Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I actually pieced this one together this morning, in preparation for this. So I hope everyone appreciates that. So these are fragments from 4Q23, which contains text from Leviticus to Numbers, and I pieced together these fragments in particular because this actually preserves the transition point. This is on the right-hand side here. You see the end of the book of Leviticus, and on the left-hand side, you see the very first lines of the book of Numbers. And this particular manuscript dates to 150 BCE. And then I'll show you, and then I'll ask you to pull up one more. And that the last one I showed you, or the last link that I sent you, should be plate 480 is what it says on it.
All right, 1 second. This one.
Yeah,
this one's nice.
Go full screen. This one's beautiful. You should be able to recognize all the letters with no problem on this.
Yeah.
One. So now this is an amazing manuscript in itself. So this is 4Q365, also known as the Reworked Pentateuch. It dates to this particular manuscript dates to about 75 BCE, although we have other copies that are older that date to 150 or so BCE. And the Reworked Pentateuch is a group of manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls that I'll talk about here in a little bit. But I wanted to the reason I showed those other manuscripts, those 3 other manuscripts, before we talk about this one.
That's the letter 3, Shalosh.
Correct.
Oh, Me over here.
Very nice. The reason I showed you those other pictures is because all three of those manuscripts, they have a few things in common. The one thing that they have in common, which is really, really interesting, is that they all belong to the same text type. When we talk, when you were talking about textual criticism in the Hebrew Bible, most scholars tend to divide texts into three basic categories as either Masoretic, Proto-Septuagint, or Proto-Samaritan. And these indicate, if you spent some time on this, you will know. I'll just explain to people in the audience. There are competing different versions of most of the books in the Old Testament. And among the Jewish communities that survived the destruction of the Second Temple, we have three surviving text types. The rabbis, the Pharisees, preserved what we know as the Masoretic text, which became the standard Hebrew text. But we also know of the Septuagint through the Greek translation that was preserved by the Christians. And the really exciting thing is that among the Dead Sea Scrolls, we found Hebrew texts which look like the Hebrew text from which the Septuagint was translated. So we now, for the first time, have Hebrew versions of what scholars for a long time have recognized as a separate text type of the Bible. And all these different text type contain significant differences in them.
Right.
The third group is the Samaritan Pentateuch.
Right.
This is the text that was preserved by the Samaritan community.
Is that the oldest?
Now, and I think it's the oldest one.
That's what
and I also think this particular one that I'm showing you here is from a group of texts called the Reworked Pentateuch. It was unfortunately titled the Reworked Pentateuch early on because it's so different from like all the biblical texts that nobody had like a parent text to identify it with. And it was originally called, it was described as a wild Pentateuch, just because of how different it was in many places from the surviving versions. It's actually closest to the Samaritan Pentateuch. And the really amazing thing about all the Reworked Pentateuch manuscripts is that this is probably our earliest form of a complete Torah. Among the fragments of the Reworked Pentateuch, we have text all the way from Genesis chapter 21 through Deuteronomy chapter 20. On this particular manuscript, there's 38 fragments, and there is material that represents every single book of the Bible, or sorry, every single book of the Torah, Genesis through Deuteronomy, all in the same scroll. Now, this text and all those other ones that I showed you are closest to the Samaritan Pentateuch. Now, here's I'll lay this out for you. I think that the first people to put these books together into a collection were the Samaritans.
That's what I thought.
And I think the manuscript evidence attests to that.
And they're the ones that stayed back, or at least I think either they stayed back or the first to go back to Israel after the Persian period, right?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's our understanding of who the Samaritans were is really complicated and fuzzy. So this is a community. What we have happening, I think these are the first. And one of the reasons I tend to think that is because we've got this manuscript evidence. The other reason is because of how the characteristics of the Samaritan Pentateuch. One of the things that we see in the Samaritan Pentateuch is a tendency towards harmonization. So many of the differences that appear in the Samaritan Pentateuch compared to the other versions, the Septuagint and the Masoretic text, are that throughout the SP, you will have scribes going to great pains to make sure that everything aligns with every other part of the text. So where there are inconsistencies, for example, between something in the book of Exodus or the book of Deuteronomy, they'll often just transpose text from Exodus into Deuteronomy and Deuteronomy back into Exodus, and they'll massage it a little bit to make it all line up. So this is what we call harmonization, and this is a characteristic feature of the Samaritan Pentateuch. And the question would be, why would you feel the need to do that at the outset? The answer to that question is because for the first time, you're actually putting these separate books together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
that makes a lot of sense. That these
and
texts,
I tend to think that
individually in their own scroll.
Yep.
And then when they're trying to codify this stuff, or put it
then
together, they need them. It somehow needs to coalesce together.
Yes. So that's where these changes come in. And I think the Samaritans were the first ones to do this. And then I think that other Jewish communities started doing it too, which is where you get things. I didn't share the last picture with you, but we have some fragments from Murdabat, which date to the early 2nd century AD, CE. These are from the Bar Kokhba revolt of a Torah manuscript. It's got text from Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers, I think. Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers, and it's very close to like the Masoretic text. So, you've got this stuff taking place. I think it started with the Samaritans, and then I think other people followed suit. And I think what you have at Qumran.
When do you think the Samaritans started putting together a Pentateuch?
Probably, I think, I don't think the people who were collecting manuscripts at Qumran, I don't think they had much of anything to do with the Samaritans, but they had their text. And they had early copies of something like their text, like 150 BCE, right? So I think it has to take place at the very latest, at some point towards the end of the 3rd century. I think it's probably earlier than that. But
the only thing we disagree about is the material in the text having older versions circulating before they put together. But we agree on when it's being put together.
Yes. And I think I think it's really important for people to hear that, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about the Torah, we're talking about this collection of literature that emerged out of basically the Hellenistic period. But I also think, importantly, something that people miss is the fact that we've got all these versions, right? We've got like the Samaritan Pentateuch, we've got the Septuagint, which looks really different, and the Masoretic text. And I think this isn't something that I think it takes time for those sorts of streams of tradition to develop. So I really think you can't put it much later than like mid 3rd century or mid to late 3rd century. And I think the traditions, the textual traditions, predate that. Pretty much all of them. So, the really frustrating thing in all this is that we've got like I often like to talk from the perspective of material culture and manuscripts. We've got great evidence starting in the 2nd century BCE. We've got a smattering of stuff from the 3rd century, BCE. But then in that critical time between the destruction of Jerusalem and the emergence of these Jewish groups, the Samaritans, the Pharisees, the Essenes, there's a black box, which, it's I don't know what's in there. We have some hints or some clues. Elephantine is really interesting for providing information about what's happening there, but it's not like it's one of those things where as much as valuable as I think Elephantine is for informing us about these early stages of quote unquote Judaism, which is a problematic term, right? When you're going back this far, it's also still representative of this one place. And I know we have some other epigraphic stuff that we can use to align with it, but
you know what else plays into this is when you start seeing synagogues start popping up in the archaeology around 200 BC.
Yes.
So, which would make sense. You have a text, a unified text, a mythology, a national mythology, and you're spreading it around. Now it's actually public. Now it's actually out there. It's not just the priestly class has these prophets and they're keeping it to themselves. So we agree on most of this stuff then. And I think the kicker is Alexandria. When Alexandria gets built, there is this interest by the people in Alexandria, who many of them are Jews. Most of them are Jews, I think. I think it's like most of the people there are Jews. There's a lot of Orphic, Pythagorean Greeks, philosophers there. And they're coalescing, they're vibing. I mean, this is one of my go-tos. Let's see if I have it here. I thought I did. Oh, it's not here, I guess. Is the pseudepigrapha from James Charlesworth. I thought I had it here. Oh yeah, it's right here. This is a must-have if you're interested in this type of stuff, because it's got so much information on the outside text that you don't hear about.
Oh yeah, right.
It paints the picture of everything. Like all of a sudden, Alexandria, 3rd century BC. All of a sudden, you get like a whole wave of authors with people with names: Aristobulus, Philo, Theodotus, Ezekiel the tragedian, who's a Jewish Greek tragedian.
Yeah.
And they're all and so you're seeing a clash, Jewish of Hebrewism and Greekism, Hellenism, and what I think happens is the Greeks are interested in what's your culture like. We want to know what your history is.
Yeah.
Tell us about your heroes. Who's Moses? Who's Abraham? And they start writing these stories, and then once that gets established, that our national mythology is now out there in the world, they have to keep that together now. And that's something I've been I'm just thinking logically. It's not like I'm not reading a text that tells me this. I'm just thinking logically. Once you have your national mythology out there spreading around, especially in a different language now it's time that they're codified now. It's right at that point.
Yeah. So no, I tend to think that's probably right in terms of one side of the picture of this. There's also one of the other things that we discovered at Qumran, and we're just literally, just scratching the surface on, is a sudden explosion of Aramaic literature that I don't think you can trace back. This appears to be natively Palestinian literature, and there's tons of it. Like we have over 150 of the manuscripts in the Dead Sea Scrolls are Aramaic texts, most of which we had never even known of before. We knew of some of these, right? Like the books of Enoch were written in Aramaic. We know that. We have Aramaic copies of these, but we've also got things like the Aramaic Levi document, or chunks of Daniel. Yeah, but and I think the really interesting thing is that what you see happening in Daniel, we've got all this Aramaic from Daniel, is it comes out of that stream, right? And you have a lot of there are other texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls featuring Daniel written in Aramaic, and then you have this wide range of other texts, many of them dealing with dream visions and prophets of like the last days and things like that. So, it's a complicated mess. It really is, in terms of everything that's going on. And the textual picture, even though this is all emerging, right, starting in, I think, the 3rd century and working forward, the Hasmonean um revolt, which results in the first independent Judean kingdom for the first time in hundreds of years, I think helps to move this, accelerate this quite a bit. The Hasmoneans sort of adopted the Torah, and adopted the Pharisaic school as a means to propagate their own political agenda. And that really had a huge part in both paving the way for what we now recognize as early Judaism,
Right.
while at the same time completely disenfranchising and marginalizing, everyone else, like the Samaritans.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I mean, this has been a lot of fun. We're almost up on 2 hours, and we have some super chats. So I wonder
I forgot about those. We could do
if
those.
we should, if there, I don't know, do you want to? Is there anything else?
Well,
that,
I don't. I didn't think. I didn't know you were where you were landed on the final, the final product. So we agreed that the final product, the Torah,
Oh yeah,
is a Hellenistic text.
Absolutely. Now, I think we will probably still continue to have disagreements about how extensive that redaction was.
Right.
And honestly, that's a question that no one can answer, right? Like scholars are going to keep working on that until, we've got manuscripts. Unfortunately, the so-called Moses scroll that Moses Shapira and his colleagues forged way back in the 19th century is a forgery. So we have nothing. We have nothing like that to help inform us further about what this text looked like in these years prior. So
what are your thoughts on the Hellenistic? Well, they're like Hellenistic, but they're early on as far as sources of early Judaism. Aristobulus, Theodotus, and Demetrius the chronographer. Those 3 sources in particular, as well as I think Hecataeus of Abdera, but he's not even Jewish; he's Greek. Those 3 other I mentioned were Jewish. Okay. They say that Moses is this character Musaeus, who is either in some sources he's the son of Orpheus or the father of Orpheus. Have you ever run into this yet?
And if no, I haven't.
About this in the next one. This is a whole nother. I'm working, so I got a video coming out, and this is another thing we're going to disagree on, I think, but it'll be fun to hash it out. The origins of Yahweh himself as a Midianite. Where does he come from? And some of the archaeology out of the Midianite cities show Aegean pottery.
Oh, really? Oh, right, yeah.
And so there's a Cretan god. There's a Cretan god he's called Yahweh. And it's an early form of Dionysus.
Interesting.
Now, I'm not asking you to even comment on that. This is way.
No,
I'll shoot you some text and show you what I'm.
Okay. Yeah,
we'll have a discussion on this.
So I mean, and maybe that's a good place to come full circle. I still tend to think that the figure there's a Moses figure that Jeremiah knows, and that.
So you probably think that his name Moses coming from the Egyptian son of.
I think I think it's a poor attempt to make an Egyptian name, and that's the best that they could do, right?
Yeah.
Or it's one of those things, right? Like if I'm gonna write a story about a Ukrainian. I'm going to call him Stanislav or something like that, just because it's the only Slavic sounding name that I can think of off the top of my head. I think that's where the name comes from. But I think
last question.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts on the idea of Hebrew having 8,000 words and Greek having. What is your thoughts on that? And then we'll go to super chats.
I don't know. So I guess like it. So much of this depends on how you're like the problem of making this kind of a comparison is because Greek and Hebrew, like they're different systems of languages, right? And because of that, I mean, for one thing, Greek has vowels. Hebrew is a consonantal polyglot. And it's hard to make this one-to-one comparison because words in what constitutes a word in Hebrew does different things than in Greek, and Greek is a much more flexible, malleable language because of, thankfully, vowels. Because of that, it's just, there's things that you can do with it that are way more expensive than whatever you can do with Hebrew. So in that sense, Hebrew looks like just a much simpler
Ready for this
language, right?
I just want to ask you a question. This is like this is no like trick. This is just like, you're gonna know this. I know this. What letter is this in Hebrew?
Oh, shit. That's
it's from the older.
Oh yeah, the paleo stuff. I'm so
the yod.
I actually have to look that up. That's the yod.
And I didn't mean to
weird looking yod.
I didn't mean to throw that on you like that. But the reason why I mentioned that, it's actually, it is the yod, but in archaic Greek it's called digamma.
Right.
And it's a w. So the Greeks are adopting the exact same alphabet with the exact same symbols, but just doing different things with it. So
sure.
Yod in Greek is a w. That's why when I found that god Yahweh or Yahwehos in Crete,
sure,
some of the forms is Wawaka. So it's like, and then Dionysus's name in one of the Euripides texts is Yakos, which could have been Wakos. So, and it's just, and I only reason I brought that up, I didn't mean to like throw that on you the last, because this is like random shit, but it's because the alphabet is exactly the same, but they're trying to morph an Indo-European language onto and then down here it's a Semitic language morphing onto the same alphabet, and you can see how
exactly
two different.
And this is kind of, I mean, this is just kind of how languages emerge in the period, right?
Yeah,
like you see the same thing happening with the pre-alphabetic languages too, where they're all using cuneiform. Like, cuneiform is used for Akkadian, and it's used for Ugaritic, and it's used for Sumerian, and it's it's very similar.
What I found the other day is Sanskrit in cuneiform.
Really?
I swear to God, I'll show. I still have the pictures of them. I'll show you them right now. I still have them. It's right here. I had to take screenshots. I'll show you what these are right now. This is fascinating. So this is from the Mitanni period. It's a treaty between the Hittites and the Mitanni. On one side is Hittite, the other side is Vedic Sanskrit.
Really? Can you zoom in on that?
Yeah.
So they're just doing right. They're doing they're giving phonetic value to
bilingual stone, and it's a peace treaty, and they're honoring the gods from the Vedas. Indra,
that's wild.
Indra, Varuna, and Mitra. And those
guys, what year is that?
Bronze Age, I think 1400 BC. One of these is 1400 BC. The other one, this one, is 1600 BC. This is Vedic Sanskrit in cuneiform.
Really? Wow.
And it's
very cool.
It's not a passage.
Very interesting.
It's not a passage from the Vedas, but it's similar. It's invoking the gods in a similar way. It's mentioning I don't think it mentions Shiva, but it's the Vedic gods. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what cuneiform does. It doesn't matter if it's Indo-European or whatever.
You can it's very, very adaptable.
Right.
So yeah. But this has been fun.
Yeah. So, all right, let's do the super chats.
Let's do that.
So first of all, you want to do yours first? Want to go back and forth? Is that what you want?
No, just whatever comes up.
I'll do one, is cool. And you do one. We'll just go back.
All right. Okay.
Mike, thanks for becoming a member. I appreciate that. All right, you're up.
So this one, I guess. Oh, I think you're gonna have to do them because it's your channel. Because I can't pull them up.
Oh, okay. All right, so I don't know if it's your.
Don't worry about it.
It might be your members then.
I think these are yours because mine have the little link on them. So
all right. Thank you, Vince Arrow, for becoming a member. Appreciate that. I hope I can keep you on for a while. I always never know what to say to the new members. Like, just thank you. It's like I want to read something, but it's just you can't read anything. Thank you for joining, and I hope that I can keep you on. Let's see what we got. I got to go through a lot of messages. Here we go. From Damon. How old did Moses live to be? I forgot what the text even says. Isn't he the first one to die at a normal age?
No. The Genesis talks about Yahweh limiting the age of men to like 120 years.
Right, but isn't that happen at Moses? Isn't that when Moses comes around, or no? Before
so I don't, off the top of my head, I do not remember. So
yeah, I don't remember.
Sorry, Damon.
But I will say this: I don't think Moses existed historically.
I also don't think Moses. Well, I'll say this: I don't. Yeah, I think that the Exodus tradition probably retains something, not all of it, but I think there's probably elements of some sort of slave escape or migration out of Egypt.
Oh, there's tons on this. There's tons.
Maybe behind a leader, right? Like if there was, I think that's the very best you can do.
By the way,
but that doesn't really help us.
There's another legend about King Bacchus. King Bacchus was a Egyptian from the 24th dynasty. So it's around like 700 BC, 717 to 711 BC. And this is according to a couple different sources, Greek sources, and I think Tacitus mentions this too. And he says during this reign there was an oracle of Ammon, and oracle said kick all the Jews out because they are the ones responsible for some sort of plague that happened. And so then the story is that they leave Egypt, and this is not in the Bronze Age, but it does say Moses was there. So it's a late. Right. It's closer to we're closer in time to us, way closer. And it's like, it's not 1300 BC, it's 700 BC. And it's like Moses leads them into the desert after 7 days, the whole 9 yards. But yeah, it's a little bit different. But yeah, there's another legend about King Bacchus. I mean, for this text, you actually get a king's name for once. The other one, you just get Pharaoh. So I will say there might be something might have happened. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe it's kind of interesting that our actual first mentions of Moses, if we're dating texts like Micah, to the 7th century, and he mentions Moses, that's all. Right. That's also in the 7th century, right? So yeah. I don't know.
So you might have some sort of Moses legend happening right around that time.
Maybe.
Yeah. So there you go. Hopefully that answers our question. All right. So let's see. What else do we got? Master Makiter. I just want to
Machetier. That's Master Machetier.
Master Machetier. I just want to understand Exodus.
Exodus.
Yeah. It does say Exodus.
It does say Exodus.
424. What's happening there? Do you know?
Oh, that's the yeah. So that's this weird story of Moses and his wife, his woman, and his sons. He's traveling to Egypt, and then it says that Yahweh encountered him and tried to kill him, and then his wife Zipporah she circumcises his son, and then touches his foreskin to his genitals, and throws it on the ground and says, "You have become a bridegroom of blood to me." That's basically the story. I think this is an early etiology, so maybe a clumsily formed etiology about circumcision. But I think because it's it's like it's almost like a fragment of an idea. Like whoever wrote this story had an audience who understood background things that we're missing. And because of that, it's very difficult to understand and clearly see, you know, the fuller meaning of what's going on in there, or even some of the stuff that is unspoken. But the very best that we can do is this is some sort of early etiology about circumcision. So circumcision as a practice is ancient, and it was practiced by the Egyptians, not the Canaanites, but I think there were in the East. I think they also practiced circumcision, and it was probably we don't know when, but at some point it was adopted by the people who were living in Israel.
You just reminded me that one of the things that I was wanted to I was gonna bring up euhemerism. To me, that's a sign of Hellenism. Euhemerus lived in like the mid 4th century BC, and he's famous. And then he started a whole new genre where everybody started taking gods and putting them on Earth as humans and historically. Right. And I think one of the examples that I think is in the Phoenician mythologies that we get, Philo of Byblos is one of the sources that we have. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of sources, but according to some of these scholars of Ugaritic sources, he's not spot on. He's not like perfectly describing the Ugaritic stories. He's changing a lot of shit, but there's enough there where you can tell he's somewhat knowledgeable of Ugaritic sources. But he totally euhemerizes it, totally Hellenizes it. He starts equating El with Saturn and all this stuff. But the reason why I brought it up is because he mentions a story about El sacrificing his only begotten son and then starting a new rite of circumcision for every child on the 8th day. And I'm thinking to myself, that's funny because Abraham also sacrifices his only son, and Abraham's the one who starts circumcision in the Bible. So is there a euhemerization happening? Is El becoming is what El did becoming what Abraham does? It's a question, But anyways, we're already past our time limit, so let's keep going. Thank you for that super chat. Icapod, thank you for the super chat. Sitting on a plane, getting ready to take off, and saw online. Thank you.
Thanks, Icapod.
Love. Thanks, Icapod. I love it. Thank you for the super chat. All right. We got some more, I believe. A lot of comments. Holy shit. Thank you for all the comments, by the way. Hope you're all having fun. John Geek, thank you for the $10. Is using the term Jews for people in the Omri kingdom during the Neolithic anachronistic.
Well, absolutely. And it's just totally wrong too, because you might get away with using the term Jews for Judahites. In the period, and I wouldn't even do that though. I prefer to call them Judahites just as a way, because I think it's important to be clear that Judaism, Jewishness, is an idea that emerged much later in the post-exilic period. So the people who were living in the kingdom of Omri during the Neo-Assyrian period, these were maybe the best way to describe them would have been like the early Sumerians, not Samaritans, but Sumerians. Omri's city was Samaria. So.
Yeah. And I like the term Yahwism. I love it because it covers anyone who's under the branch of worshiping Yahweh, whether it's temple or not, whether it's Elephantine or temple or not. They're Yahweh. Well, I guess that wouldn't matter about people living in a kingdom. I'm talking specifically about people worshiping Yahweh. So
right.
So yeah, maybe not for this question, but for a totally different category. All right, let's go to the next that super chat.
You got a super sticker.
Oh, did I miss one?
It's next.
Oh, okay.
So
I don't miss it. I'm trying to find them all.
Are you not looking at the starred comments?
You can do the star. That's right.
Oh yeah.
All right.
It's way easier, man.
I don't know why I wasn't looking at the starred. One time I got screwed over on the start and I missed the button.
Really?
So I stopped doing it. But if it's good, I'll just go to it then.
I hope so. That's the only one that's the only way I ever do it. So I hope I don't steer you wrong.
Oh no, let's try. Let's try. Let me know if I miss anybody. Damon, 99-cent super sticker. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Simone Sleep with the $2.99. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Whoa, Apotheon drops a $49.99.
Nice.
Thank you so much for that super chat. That is very, very nice. You did not have to do that, and I appreciate it. Thanks for this cool conversation. There aren't very many people who could keep up with all the necessary facts in this discussion.
Yeah, it was a lot, wasn't it? So but I suspect your audience is probably a little bit like my audience and doesn't mind the arcane and the nitty gritty when it comes to this.
No, I think they love it. I think they do. They love
so.
They like to go deep. Thank you. By the way, thank you again for that huge super chat.
Yeah.
I can't just go to the next one that quick. So once again, thank you. Anthony Lucio, thank you for the $4.99. Why is modern Israel not called Judah? Where Shashu nights? How is your day? Happy Juneteenth, everyone. Happy Juneteenth to you too.
Happy Juneteenth. Now I think the reason, I guess this is more complicated. There's another complicated thing going on here. Can you give me a second? There's a dog going nuts here. So just give me a minute, guys.
I figured you're gonna do that. While we are waiting, I can guess what he's gonna say. Oh, Shashu. So my thoughts on the Shashu, I was doing some deep dives into the Shashu. I think that's a reference to the Midianites, and I think it's a reference to the nomads in Sinai region. Also, be on the lookout for a video that I'm about to come out with about Yahweh. And I'm doing it's very speculative. I'm going to put that out there right in front. And I'm making sure the video, I say that too. It's very speculative about the origins of Yahweh. But anyways, Kip is back.
I heard all that. And I think that, well, I mean, the stuff about the Shasu, I think that was mostly right. So one of the things that I didn't mention in our conversation, one of the things that is developing in this period, really since the end of the Northern Kingdom, this idea of being sons of Israel, B'nai Yisrael, true Israelites, is something that becomes sort of a national ideal. Remember, I mentioned that in the book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah from the 8th century starts to have this vision for this, utopian United Kingdom, which I think is sparked by this migration of people coming from the north into the south. But this is an idea that it basically gets repeated and latched onto for centuries, moving forward to the point where during the Second Temple period, you have people using this identifier, sons of Israel, as a way to distinguish themselves from outsiders. It's one of the reasons why the Samaritans were called Samaritans, is because the true Israelites, the true sons of Israel, were distinguishing themselves from them. So that's, I mean, the identifier Israel, even though it was properly northern, this is kind of how it came to encapsulate the entire region, really. And that's, I mean, that's what the modern project of the state of Israel is all about too, is about reestablishing this ancient home, this ancient kingdom, I suppose, in the modern world. So that's why it wasn't called Judah, because Israel is very much it's a pretty powerful religious political idea that stretches back way into antiquity. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it made sense to me. Thank you for that super chat. Rodrigo Abdo with the membership.
I think that's one of mine. Oh no, that's not. Is that one of mine?
Oh,
I don't think.
No, it's not. It's not. Yeah. Okay.
No, it's yours. Okay.
Thank you. Constellation Pegasus with the 9.99. If I remember correctly, the Iliad and Odyssey were considered sacred scripture or something. Well, actually, yes. Not in the same way, but people were so amazed by Homer, the bard, and whether he existed or not, or whatever the Homer we have in our.
You talk about Homer. I'm gonna.
Yeah,
I'll be back.
Homer was such a game changer to the Greek world that the archaeology. This is what an archaeologist actually told me. This is how I know this. The archaeology in that period reflects things we find in Homer. So, like the way they offer sacrifices is like exactly how Homer describes it. It's like when they dig up these sites in that Homeric period, the 700s BC, something like that, 600s, 700s BC. They find people lived as if they were in. It's like people were so influenced by the Homeric milieu. It was such a world changer. So yeah, does that make it sacred? I think so. And obviously there's a lot going on with the Iliad as far as like the gods intervening on human affairs. So yeah, it's scripture. I mean, I guess you could call it, but it's more like music. Homer is performed by a bard playing a lyre. So, which is like Psalms. I would compare it to the Psalms if I was to say where I compare Homer to the Psalms. Anyways, thank you for that super. Oh, do you want to say anything about that?
Nope.
Okay. Well, this one is for you. Hard work is it's got your little symbol on it, so it says, "Thanks, Kip, for being cool. Finish your dang book."
I'm trying. It's a big book. I've written about 115,000 words. And I still have probably like 5 chapters to finish. So I'm just presently finishing my chapter about the development of literacy and the connection to religious traditions in ancient Israel. So and then next I'm going to be talking about the archaeological the archaeological landscape that informs us about ancient Israelite religions. So it's coming. I wish it was coming faster, but man, it's some days it's hard to find the time to write. So, but it's coming, guys.
Nice. This one is also for you from
Aramgard.
Is there much evidence for Abraham and Isaac traditions pre-exile? That's a good question. Like we have with Moses and Jacob.
Yeah. No, this is one of those things, right, where I think these are probably, and I have no idea where some of this stuff comes from, but I think this is probably later development. You see as I'm thinking through this, you see this mention of the God of your fathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, appearing in the Deuteronomistic history. So, but I don't know if you can trace that back to a pre-exilic layer, or if that's part of post-exilic editing. But yeah, them in particular, Abraham and Isaac in particular, seem to be. It's interesting because they seem to be sort of bit players in terms of the ways in which the text describe the founding of the nation of Israel until you get to Genesis, which, as I mentioned, is in my opinion one of the later books of the Hebrew Bible to actually have been written. So yeah, it's I'm
on this mean tilt for the Dionysian Yakos thing, right? I know I keep bringing this up.
I couldn't tell.
Yaakov is one letter off, literally one letter off of Yakos. And there's another form of Dionysus, Yakon, with an end at the end. So there's no Yaakov, but it's one letter off. Now
it's dangerous. It's dangerous doing those sorts of
I love danger.
Those sorts of comparisons.
I love it. I love it. But well, you know, Jacob is described as a vine as well. You know, that's one thing. But here's the thing, though. People don't know Dionysus. They know the Roman Bacchus. They know the wine frenzy drunken fat Dionysus. The farther back you go, when you get into the Bronze Age Dionysus, it's a god of life. It's a god of water and like moisture and the raising of crops, not just grapes, but all types of fruits, all types of vintage, and prophecy and divine inspiration. So it's a lot deeper than just this party wine god. It's a lot deeper, a lot more going on there. One more thing I want to say about this. As far as the Abraham and Isaac traditions go, this to me, this goes back to the Elephantine thing. It's like you would think you not only do you think to find it there, but like, for example, Homer's Iliad is dated to 750. I think sometimes some people go to 800. I think some people go to 800 BC, 9th century. I don't even know. I don't even know where I have no idea why those two things vary. But I do know there's an archaeological discovery called Nestor's Cup, and it's the pottery is found in a town that was dug up from the 8th century BC. The pottery lines up with all the other 8th century BC pottery. It's pretty much not guaranteed, 99% that this is a 750 BC dated, and it's got a little quote from Homer on there. Not only that, you have grammarians in the 7th to 6th and even 5th century in Athens. There's a huge grammarian. The Indians do this too. The Indians are extremely literate, like probably just as much as the Greeks are. They have like all these people writing about other authors, and they're like debating each other, sort of like what you see in like later Talmudic Jewish literacy, like that type of stuff. A lot of back and forth, a lot of commentaries on Homer. There's like Homeric scholars. Even Plato's Ion. It's this guy Ion he calls himself a Homeric. He calls himself a rhapsode, but he's like, I'm also a scholar of Homer, and I know all about Homer. So it's like this very scholarly atmosphere going on. And so the thing that this is what drove me down this whole Hellenistic dating thing, is I'm noticing these webs of text where Homer is dated to a certain period. The Torah is dated to a certain period. The Vedas are dated to a certain period. Then what I'm looking for is when these texts are cited, and when you start to see webs, someone's citing it, someone's citing that person, Hecataeus of Deir, Alexander Polyhistor, Manetho, Berosus, and then all of a sudden and then you get like a whole web of people citing each other, and you can't deny it. Like it's like it's so the evidence is just like there's obviously something going on in this period. So that's what I mean by when I'm looking for evidence that's like as far as I can go with my expertise, is I just look for when it's getting cited, when it shows up in the historical record, that type of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's pretty much my little rant on that. But, and by the way, to bring it back to Abraham and Isaac, that's what I mean by you don't get people talking about or writing about Abraham until like around the time of Alexandria. So
no, you don't.
But yeah, we've gone through that enough now. So thank you for the super chat. Arrow Coast. I hope I said that right. Arrow Coast. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Thank you too. Discovering
who's that guy
with Pat Lowinger.
Pat Lowinger is still awake.
What are you doing here? You're not allowed here, dude. You guys huge it out. You meant to say.
I think he meant. Listen, if I could hug Neal, I would. but it's far away, right? Yes.
All right, thank you, Pat Super Chat. Oh, look who's in the house. History
Oh yeah.
Valley is in the house. Jacob Berman. Go subscribe to my boy, History Valley. He's doing big things over there. Do either of you think that, given that there are references to Moses, perhaps before the Torah existed, that also doesn't attribute a Torah to Moses, suggests that he was a later recast as an author, when at one point he was not?
So, yeah, like I think the Moses figure is something that comes out of what scholars call the Levitical school, basically. And this is one of the reasons why Jeremiah mentions him. Interestingly, mentions him in conjunction with Samuel, who is also part of this Levitical school. This is the priesthood that's attached originally to the northern sanctuary in Shiloh, the very, very ancient northern sanctuary in Shiloh, but which ended up in Anatoth, which is just on the outskirts of Jerusalem. That's where Jeremiah came from, and this was also part of Josiah's cultic reforms had to do with the elevation of the Levites, and this is something we also see happening in the Persian period as well. Is this focus on the role of the Levites? And I think the reason it's out of this milieu that this Moses figure comes from. So within, and his first appearance is probably in, like, out of all the Torah books. I mentioned that I think the book of Deuteronomy was probably the first one that was finished in the form we have it today. So it was probably the first book where Moses was featured as the primary character, and it's also the only book in the entire Torah where Moses writes anything. So yeah, I think you're right about him being recast later, and taking on this role. But importantly, I think people also need to clearly see that later interpretations read this onto him inappropriately. Like, Moses is nowhere, wasn't considered or mentioned as the author of any of these texts, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, certainly until much later in time. This is a very late Second Temple idea.
Yeah, and by the way, Hecateus of Abdera, when he writes his story about the fact that he's writing a story about Moses before the Torah is finished, or before we get this mid 3rd century, that tells you there is a tradition going on.
Yes.
He's floating around. He's an idea. He's out there. By the way, I just want to mention something before people call me crazy. I think Bart Eric thought I was crazy for talking about Moses as Musaeus. I asked him that. So just a quick little rundown of the history. He had a course going on about who is Moses, is their historical Moses. And I jumped in to promote the course, and I asked him what his thoughts were on Moses being Musaeus. And he looked at me like I had 3 heads. And look, all I'm doing, this is Artapanus from the Pseudepigrapha, and he writes, as a grown man, he was called Musaeus by the Greeks. This Musaeus was the teacher of Orpheus. I'm like, I don't, maybe Bart just didn't know the source. Fine, I don't get it. This is a very obscure source. I get it. But like, he thought I was crazy for saying this. And I just want to show people who this character is, because if this is somewhat true, or maybe not true, but just to show people who this guy is, this guy goes back to like the 9th century BC. This Musaeus character. He's so ancient.
It is spelled differently than Moses.
Yes, yes. Look at, here's how it's spelled. Mosaios. And it's Greek, so it's obviously going to be spelled. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, even like the Greek version is different too.
There's different versions. There's Musaeus. Look, there's Mosias and then Musaeos. So yeah, it comes out differently in different parts. The Alexandrian spell is named differently than the people in Athens. So one of them is with Musaeus, the other one's Mosaeus. But this guy is so ancient that as soon as you start finding Greek text, he's there. Like he's in the oldest Greek text that we have. Musaeus is there. So I can see why the Alexandrians were tempted to make this connection. That's all.
Right.
That's all.
I could see the temptation there for sure.
It's yeah, and you know me, I just let go. I like going into that kind of weird stuff.
Yeah, you do.
What I'm known for. I don't. What else can I offer to the table? You know, I gotta be able to give something. You know. Thank you, Will Mose. What do you actually disagree on at the end of all that?
I think you need to read it. What do you actually disagree on at the end? Right.
We don't actually disagree on much, except.
Well, I would say I think the big disagreement between Neal and I still would be the extent to which the Torah was redacted, edited, and added to in the Hellenistic period, and also probably with regards to how far we can take some of this Hellenistic influence. You know, I still have serious reservations about connecting Greek texts to lots of stuff in the Hebrew Bible that you would probably be like, dude, it's right there.
Well, I think whether it's Platonism or something akin to what Platonism becomes, I think you can draw comparisons to what's going on with Yahweh in Genesis, the way he's presented. I think you could say he's like Platonic, if not being influenced by Platonic.
Maybe, yeah, I would say maybe in parts of Genesis.
Right.
So because there's some of the what I would consider the earlier texts in Genesis present this very corporeal God.
Yeah.
100%. Right. So, anyways, there's still plenty for Neal and me to disagree about.
Yeah, we'll have fun doing it. So, thanks for that super chat.
Oh, I like this one.
Artemisian. Is that how you say it? How does Asherah fit into the mystery?
So. Well, I mean, I think Asherah is sort of the forgotten player in all of this. You know, in the pre-exilic period in particular, the Israelite religion was Canaanite religion. And as a Canaanite religion, it looked like all the other Canaanite religions. So the worshippers of Yahweh, who were, you know, many of whom were also probably worshippers of Baal and El, were also worshippers of Asherah. And we're told several times in, you know, the Hebrew Bible that there was an Asherah pole in the temple in Jerusalem. So I think what happened as a result of first the Deuteronomic reforms of Josiah that took place in the end of the 8th century, beginning of the 7th century, the Deuteronomistic reforms that occurred there really removed Asherah from this Yahweh cult, and then after, you know, in the post-exilic period, when these traditions were being collected and formed into these groups of texts that as we have them today, there was this intensified effort to really just remove any elements of the Asherah from the cult. So yeah, Asherah got the short end of the stick in this.
By the way, you and I have talked about this on my channel before. This particular verse right here from Jeremiah, I love this passage.
Oh God, I love this. Oh,
so stop burning incense, Queen of Heaven, and pouring out offerings. we had nothing and have been perishing by the sword of famine.
Yes.
It's like, why would they admit this?
Well, I mean, I think I like the way I read, like, these are people complaining to Jeremiah,
Right.
and saying, that, this is, things were great
Well,
back when we used to worship the Makalich Shemayim, the queen of the heavens, the queen of the sky, the Asherah. Why would we just restrict our obeisance to Yahweh? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
right.
It's a great chapter. And I think it's a really useful text for gaining kind of a window into what this religious world looked like. But you have to read it carefully, right? You have to read it through the lens of a polemicist. Like, this is a polemicist doing his best to abrogate the worship of Asherah. So you can't just take it at face value, right? But it's a great text. Jeremiah 44, the whole chapter.
Good stuff.
All right. I think you got one more.
Yep.
And then I got to run.
Yep, that's you. That's at your
Okay. Hail Nero. Hail Gnostic Informant. Hail Dr. Kill. That's awesome. Thank you, My Unfinished Journey. Thank you, Neal, for doing this with me this afternoon. This was good.
I had a blast.
Yeah, I had fun.
We'll do more in the future. Thanks for everything. And that's it. Yeah, we can hit that outro and get out of here.
Excellent. Let's do it.
All
See
right.
you, everyone.
See you, everyone. Oh, you have just attained true gnosis.